Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the installation stage, Coverings 2019. Today is Wednesday, middle of the show. We're almost smack in the middle of the show. We've got a lot to offer yet. Glad to see you. I see some repeat faces, and I'm sure we'll see more repeat faces when you come see us later in the week, tomorrow and Friday, at our Silica workshop in S330. That's upstairs out in the session rooms, S330. Come there. The rest of this day and tomorrow, we will continue training you on topics out of our NTCA Reference Manual. And the people that are training with us today are me. I'm Mark Heinlein, Training Director for the National Tile Contractors Association. To my left is Randy Fleming. He is a trainer for the National Contractor Association. To Randy's left is Joseph Matisse. Joseph is a member from South Carolina. Joseph, what is your company's name?
On the Level.
On the Level Flooring, right there. He's a great guy, a good member from South Carolina. And to my right is my friend Rob Roderick. He's a trainer for the National Tile Contractors Association. Rob, what do you have to say for yourself?
Well, first off, I'm glad you guys are all here, and I hope you're having fun in Orlando. We got some great programs. And one of the big things we want to talk about this year is making sure that everybody that in the industry has one of these books. This is a wonderful reference manual. If you are a professional or part of your business is doing tile, you need to have one of these. We train towards the industry standards set by the TCA and ANSI, and this is a great addition to those books in order to help you be successful in your business. It's set up in a problem, cause, cure format. So if you have a particular problem and you're trying to figure out what's going on and what do we need to do to fix it, this is your resource. If any of you do not have this book, of course our NTCA booth is just right around the corner. Go around there, talk to our people. We'll make sure that we can get one to you.
And what we're talking about today is the section in the NTCA Reference Manual that discusses proper bedding procedures. Now, we're not talking how to make your bed, because I don't even know how to do that right, but we're talking how to bed tile, all right? And we've got a variety of tile that we'll be using today, so we've got a lot to go over. The first thing we want to go over is proper bedding procedures for this stuff right here. This is a natural stone tile. It's beautiful, and you can see it's got some veining to it. And manufacturers, to hold this tile together, because it can be sometimes soft and a little bit fragile, they put a mesh on the back. You've all seen this mesh, right? Well, there's something special about this mesh, and Rob is going to tell us what is special about it.
Well, some of the most beautiful stones out there and the most expensive stones out there have a lot of different characteristics that make them interesting, and those characteristics sometimes make it difficult to use in fabrication. You know, there's voids and there are veins, and what I mean by that is they can break quite easily. So the manufacturer of these products, of course, puts this backing on it to help support it and to maintain its integrity until we get it installed in an installation. So just because it has this backing doesn't necessarily mean that you have an inferior product. You may have one of the most expensive stones on the market. They have some beautiful qualities. They just need a little bit of reinforcement until they get set in our adhesive. Now, when we're using this type of product here that has this backing, there's really not any set standards for what type of backing and how it's adhered. So manufacturers use a variety of different things, and some of the failures that we've seen when using this is when people use the wrong adhesive. So one thing we encourage people to do is reach out to the provider of the stone and find out what the appropriate adhesive is to use with their stone. Now, one thing that you can use almost on any one of those is an epoxy adhesive. An epoxy adhesive will work with all of these type of backings. So that's what we have here. We have some epoxy mixed up. Couple of things that he's done. He cleaned the surface of the board before he started. He's keyed in the mortar, and you can see he's keyed in the mortar, and he's spread the mortar directionally in one direction. Now, with stone, it's recommended to back butter the tiles on stones. That's a recommendation from the Marble Institute of America, and you can see here he's actually burning in that mortar into the back of the tile before he sets it.
So this epoxy that helps not re-emulsify that resin adhesive that's holding the mesh to the back of the stone. I'll say that another way. There's that mesh applied to the back of the stone with this resin material, right? And only the manufacturer of that mesh, of that stone, knows what that resin is. So that resin could be a water absorptive. It could be water emulsifiable. So if we use a regular thin set, it could cause that resin to delaminate from the stone, right, Rob?
That's exactly right. And another reason that we might want to go with one of these epoxies is some stones are water sensitive. You know, green stones in particular, if you've ever used a green stone and you use a regular thin set to install that green stone, because it's water sensitive, it can actually cup and pull up. And we did some demonstrations at surfaces in Las Vegas this year where we kind of showed that when we used the wrong adhesive, we didn't use a epoxy, we used a traditional thin set adhesive with a green stone, it literally curled up. So that's another reason to use an epoxy.
So there you go, that's the proper bedding procedures for a resin-backed, mesh-backed natural stone. Check with the manufacturer and check with your setting material manufacturer on their epoxy adhesives. Very important. Now what we're going to do, we're going to bring Joseph in, and Joseph is going to be keying into this substrate that Randy has dampened, okay? So Randy went onto that substrate, he used a sponge, he lightly dampened it, and by doing that, he gave it the surface a little bit of a drink because we've properly mixed our mortar, our adhesive, our bond coat, our thin set, so that the tile will adhere properly. He also ended up cleaning the substrate, getting any dust or bond breakers off of there. So Joseph now is keying in the mortar to the substrate, and what that's doing is it's ensuring a good grab, a good bond to that flat substrate. Then what he'll do is he'll start troweling the ridges using his gauge. Every trowel that we have is nothing but a gauge, right? So now what Joseph is doing, he's gauging that bond coat onto the substrate so he can apply the tile properly. And the tile that we're going to apply is what Randy has right here. Some dot-mounted mosaic, all right? So Randy, why don't you go ahead and stick that, see how you do, all right? Okay, Randy's got it stuck on.
That mosaic is oftentimes used in a wet area on shower floors. You guys have seen that. The mortar coverage requirement in a wet area is 95%. That's kind of difficult to get sometimes with the mosaic.
So can you hold that up, Randy, so the audience can see that? Bam, hit it right out of the park, right? Okay, did you notice what Randy did? He pressed that mosaic into the tile and he gave it a little bit of a tap. Sometimes you don't always get great coverage and you get some bleed through here. So what Randy is showing me that through that grout joint on this thinner dot mount mosaic, we get that bleed through. So we've got to get in there and wash it, come back the next day, clean it up. So now we're going to show you a little bit of a trick to even ensure better coverage and not get that bleed through. So what we've done here is we've troweled out using that 1/4 by 1/4 square notch trowel. Joseph primed the flat edge of his trowel and he's flattened those ridges because we've gauged on the mortar, now we gave it a helping hand. So the ridges have already been collapsed because it's hard to shift that mosaic side to side, and if you have like some 1x1 mesh mount mosaics, it's even harder than with these dot mounts, okay? So that's a really good trick to follow there. Randy's pulling it up. How did we do, Randy?
I didn't beat in good on this side, but I've got no bleed through.
Okay, so show us the back of that tile. So what Randy has said, if we would have beat it in a little bit harder with our beating block, we would have got better coverage, but ultimately on the other side in the grout joints, 0 bleed through. So it's a combination of success on both of those levels. Joseph, could you please re-trowel that for us? Now, that's bedding procedures for mosaics. Rob, what are we going to talk about next here, Rob?
Well, we could talk a little bit about using quarry tile and bedding quarry tile. We actually have a rack right over here. I don't know if
we're not going to, I'm sorry, Rob. We're not going to quite jump to quarry tile yet.
All right.
We've got a couple of other little tricks up our sleeve, things to talk about.
That. Yeah, light-colored stone.
We got to keep him in line. He wants to jump ahead.
Hey, I'm jumping ahead there. Sorry about that, guys. We can't forget to talk about light-colored stone and getting the right adhesive. We don't want to use gray adhesives or gray thin sets with a light-colored stone. That can actually discolor the stone, and that's in our NTCA handbook, and it's also spoken of in the design manual by the Marble Institute of America. We've got an example of this, and can you turn those lights off just down for a second? Turn it over this way. You see we got white thin set here, we got gray thin set here. Turn that around and watch when he takes this light across. Can you see how much of a difference that makes? So it can really change the appearance of the light colored stone, so we want to make sure that we use white thin sets when we're laying these light colored stones, or we can have a color problem.
So Randy, before you set that, please, that's an excellent thing, right? That light coming through. And what we're trying to illustrate, again, just to recap what Rob said, that darker thin set can darken the look of the stone. You know, we've seen where customers are like, oh, what happened to my stone? Now it's all dark. It's supposed to be nice and bright. They used the wrong color thin set, something simple like that. So we've got our 1/4 by 1/4 square notches, right? Tiled down here or laid down. Randy has keyed in or back buttered this stone just like he did his resin mount. Now that's his mesh mount. That is a key thing to do with stone. We want to make sure that if the stone has any voids, that it's properly filled in. Those voids are filled in to support the point load for when we're walking on it in particular. So now Randy will show us how to properly set that. He presses it in, shifts it side to side to collapse those ridges, and now he'll pull it up and check our coverage. This is very important to do with the first tile that you set on every job. How did we do, Randy?
Pretty good here, not great right through here.
Bring that right around so the entire audience can see that.
You see the trowel marks here? Well, here we have 100%. You don't see any lines from the trowel anymore. Here we still have some, so probably don't have enough thin set there.
That's right. So some of those ridges, you know, maybe we have a little bit of warpage in our substrate. Maybe our substrate isn't perfectly flat, because after all, we didn't come through and flatten this, did we? We're working with kind of a wonky system up here. Substrate flatness is the first component that is extremely critical for every tile installation. That's what we need to have for success all the way up through the layers. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, what are we doing, guys? We're going to install some...
We're going to upsize our trowel?
He's upsizing his trowel. Why is he doing that, Rob?
Well, we got to make sure that we get 95% coverage with natural stone. And one thing we always want you to do is right out of the gate, when you set that first piece of tile, check and see, just like Randy did, what kind of coverage you're getting. Because each tile is different. And one thing that we've seen working with tile contractors, me and Mark and Randy, we answer technical questions, and the way things generally go is a guy gets attached to one trowel and he uses that over and over again. But we're using different tiles with different thicknesses, and the backings could be a little bit different, so we always encourage you to check every time, see what kind of coverage you're getting, and that's what he's doing right here. We don't want to set 3,000 feet of this stone and then pick one up and realize we got a problem. At that point it's too late. We need to check it right from the beginning and see how we're doing. Also looks like we did a lot better with
Joseph, could you hold this one up? All right, now here's the difference. Okay, 1/4 by 1/4 square notch, 1/4 by 3/8 square notch. Bam, we nailed it, right? That simple little test to make sure that we're getting the proper coverage we need on the back of our tiles.
Yeah.
Awesome job, guys.
Yeah.
Why don't you plunk those right on there? We're going to get rid of this board here. And what we're going to show you next is where Rob was going to go a couple of minutes ago. Have any of you ever set quarry tile with a rack system? Please raise your hand. Quite a few of you. Very common way to set it, right? You get your layout lines set and you follow it with the rack. So we've got a rack up here on stage. This is what a rack is. Rob, you want to tell them a little bit about this thing?
Yeah, this is, whenever you're laying quarry tile, especially 6x6, You know, of course, you always want to get your reference lines and make sure that you're square with everything, but it's hard to get a 6x6 floor to look really straight. And the idea of using spacers or anything like that with so many tiles, it's kind of not, it's just not feasible as far as a time frame. So this is a really fast way. It's been used for years and years. You can get some nice straight lines with 6x6, but there are some challenges with getting mortar coverage with it. And we're going to talk about what you need to think about when you're using a rack to make sure that you get the right type of mortar coverage. Kind of similar to what we talked about earlier. They took a sponge, they cleaned the surface, they're keying in. All those steps are very similar to what we talked about before. But when we put the tile in the rack, of course, we don't have much place that we can move it. You know, we were talking about rocking that tile back and forth. Well, when it's the rack, it's a little bit more difficult to get that movement to collapse those ridges. So we have to use some other techniques. We have to use a beading block, a float, and we're going to show you some of those in just a second as soon as they get this spread. So
what trowel are we going to use here? We're going to use a 1/4 by 3/8. Is that right, Randy? So a classic trowel for this type of installation is a 1/4 by 3/8 square notch, okay? That's what we're going to use here. And we'll show you the coverage that we get once we've done this method. And we'll show you actually the method that we get installed. Now, typically, we've been setting all square tiles up here. We want to set our tiles parallel to the short edge of the ridges. We want to trowel our ridges to the short edges of the tile, like Rob's got right here.
So perpendicular to this tile, that way we can allow the air to escape quicker. So the air only has to travel, this is a 6-inch wide tile, and if we have our ridges running this way, perpendicular, the air only has to travel 3 inches. Now if we have our ridges going this way, because it's 24 inches, the air is going to have to travel 12 inches. So that's the importance of which direction we trowel with a rectangular shaped tile.
Joseph, I want you guys to watch Joseph. He was showing us some great troweling technique here just now. And Joseph, could you come up here and run one of those all the way across, just like you just did? And do you see what he just did? He did not move his arm like this. He's not going like this, because when you go like that, you're changing the angle of the trowel to the substrate, and you're changing how much mortar is being applied, right? He moved his entire body, held his arm tight, right? That is a great troweling technique that he exhibited. He's an experienced, excellent contractor that knows how to do that. So now what's going on, and they're working as a team where we're feeding Randy the tiles. Randy's installing them in the rack, getting them placed where they need to go. Now, normally we're not installing quarry tile on an angle like this. Usually it's on a flat floor. So this is actually kind of helping us a bit, because we want to get them aligned to the right spot of the rack, to the right grid line, and to the right corner, right? The perpendicular corner of the rack, so they get all aligned. Popping them in real fast. We've got the right troweling technique all the way across. Filling it up fast, going to work fast. Now on a real job, you're going to have your layout lines along here. We don't want to rely only on the rack. Like you heard Rob say, we don't want to rely on spacers to keep us true to our layout. Spacers can run off because tiles have different sizes, right? And if we rely on that, we're going to end up in trouble. So we want to have good layout lines, good layout going on, and then we do it. We get it filled up, and we do what Randy's doing here and beating it in. Pretty simple tools he's got there. Good mallet, chunk of 2x4. And why does he have that 2x4? It's bridging more than one tile. So it's each one, as he's working that across, he's using that as a beading block to transfer that pressure across all of the tiles. Now, he's grabbing that rack, and he's shifting it to align the tiles. There we go. And we happen to use a mortar here that's got some excellent properties for some excellent non-sag properties. Do you see anything sagging? I sure don't. Good mortars today can really do a great job. Well, maybe we have a little bit of sagging. I spoke a little bit soon. We're at a pitch here.
Yeah, we're at an angle.
with a heavy tile.
We wanted that angle for you guys so you could see it.
That's right. Okay, so okay, well, what we got to do is bring that up here. Let's show the audience, give them a chance to look at that. Now here's the coverage we have. What we're looking for in a dry area, we're going to call this a dry area, maybe a hallway inside a building. We want 80% coverage, okay? Randy, do we have 80% coverage?
Pretty close.
We sure do. So that method is great, looks good. Can you pull one up in the middle? Let's see how we are in a different area there. Go ahead and show them. There we go, 95% coverage. That sort of coverage would be excellent for a wet area. What's a wet area? Maybe a commercial kitchen. Might be an intermittent wet area, might be a completely wet area. Yeah, no, this one not so good. Yes, sir. So now, we've got to make sure that we're checking our coverage and our system for installation is accurate. Let's rip this off, guys. We got one more thing to show you.
I got it.
We're going to set this aside. Randy, we're going to have you carry this right to the back. Joseph can take that other end there, Rob. Okay. Joseph, you take that. Guys, get that off. Rob and I want to show you this last thing. And this is a box screed. This box screed is to help ensure that when we get ungauged stone, for instance, like we have some slate. You guys see this slate? The one in Rob's right hand is thick. The one in his left hand is thin. When we set those on the floor, we're going to have massive lippage, right? So what we've done is we've made a quick little box screed over here that will meet the size of that thickest tile in the batch. We've got to build up a little bit that thin tile to meet that thickest tile in the batch. So what Randy's doing is he's keying in the back of that tile right there. He's laying it into our box screed. Now he'll take a nice scoop of mortar, drop it onto the back of our tile in the box screed, and he's got a 16-inch flat trowel he's doing that with. He's filling that box screed. And that box screed, the thickness is designed. You see we had some layers in there to backfill that tile, that thinnest tile, so that when he pulls it off and sets it, that looks great. That it'll be consistently sized, consistently laid out so we can get that lippage to the flattest it can be with this type of slate. Pulled it off, gonna strike off the edges, pull it right out of there, and that's what we've got. We can go ahead and set that tile, regularly trowel it. We would have troweled ridges right here and set it onto that. Little trick, using a very simple box screed to help you achieve success with ungauged slate tile. So everybody, that's all we have for this program. We covered a lot of ground, and I'd like you to do me a favor. Please give our NTCA member volunteer, Joseph, a big round of applause. Joseph, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Joseph.
Isn't he a great guy? Joseph, thanks a lot. Pay attention to our schedule. We'll see you over at our booth in a while. Great job, sir.